아내가 그곳을 건드려 버렸어.
똑같아 증상이 사람들이.
Welcome back to Moviesrecapped. The story begins in the small village of Gokseong, South Korea. One morning, police officer Jong-gu is called to investigate a disturbing murder case. Upon arriving at the crime scene, he finds the murderer, bloodied and injured, sitting outside the house, handcuffed. Inside, 2 victims have been brutally killed. A fellow officer informs Jong-gu that the man was likely murdered somewhere else before being dragged back to the house. The murderer himself shows signs of a strange illness, his body covered in rashes. Jong-gu and the team soon head to a nearby shed for further investigation. The team discovers the shed drenched in blood and quickly identifies it as the original crime scene. Surrounding the area are numerous candles, suggesting some sort of ritualistic activity. As the investigation deepens, a mysterious disease begins to spread throughout the village. The illness causes severe rashes and turns the afflicted into violent killers, their eyes glowing red as they murder their own families. Rumors start to circulate that a Japanese stranger, living alone in a remote mountain house, is harboring an evil spirit and may be responsible for the outbreak. However, Jong-gu believes that the illness is caused by a type of poisonous wild mushroom. As days pass, more villagers fall victim to the disease, and the death toll rises. One night, Jong-gu is called to a house that has mysteriously caught fire. While investigating the scene, he is attacked by several infected individuals but is rescued by fellow officers. The following day, a woman's body is discovered hanging from a tree. Jong-gu takes on the case and, during his investigation, learns that the woman's husband is the prime suspect. Later, Jong-gu's partner calls him in his restaurant and tells him that the Japanese guy he talked about earlier tried to molest a dead woman by the river. Then the dead woman got crazy and started going out naked in the middle of the night and attacking whoever she encountered. The woman also had the same infectious rashes, and it turns out she was the one who attacked Jong-gu in the burned house the day before. Now, Jong-gu is convinced that the Japanese man is somehow linked to the spread of the illness. While at the crime scene of the hanging woman, a strange girl named Moo Myong begins throwing stones at him. She then enters the scene, leading Jong-gu to a hidden spot inside the house where the murder took place. The girl reveals that the Japanese man didn't just infect the woman, but he's actually a ghost responsible for the curse. The girl warns Jong-gu to be cautious of the Japanese stranger. He quickly calls his partner to come and see her, but just as he does, the girl vanishes without a trace. Meanwhile, Jong-gu's senior officer pressures him and his partner to find a lead in the case. A local hunter tells Jong-gu that he's seen a half-naked Japanese man with glowing red eyes eating a deer in the mountain forest. Jong-gu grows uneasy, as he's had disturbing dreams about this very stranger. Later that day, Jong-gu and his partner decide to visit the stranger's home, guided by the hunter. As they make their way up the mountain, rain begins to pour, and the hunter suddenly abandons them. Just as he tries to leave, a bolt of lightning strikes, hitting him. Jong-gu and his partner rush him to the hospital. At the hospital, a patient infected with the disease begins to act violently. Jong-gu notices similar rashes appearing on his own skin. The patient soon dies, blood oozing from his mouth. That night, Jong-gu's daughter, Hyo-jin, falls ill and begins screaming in her sleep. She describes a terrifying dream about a strange man, tears streaming down her face as she cries. The next day, Jong-gu's mother grows concerned, suspecting something is wrong with Hyo-jin. She tells him that she plans to call a shaman and leaves to find one. Jong-gu then meets up with his partner, who has brought along a deacon who understands Japanese. Together, they head to the mountains in search of the Japanese man. When they arrive at his house, they find it empty. Undeterred, they begin to investigate the house. Jong-gu breaks into one of the rooms and discovers it covered in candles, hinting at a ritual that took place there. Meanwhile, his partner discovers a collection of photographs of all the infected people hidden in a cupboard. Suddenly, the deacon is attacked by the house's guard dog. Jong-gu quickly pulls him to safety, but the dog breaks free and turns its aggression on them both. They rush inside the house, blocking the entrance as the dog viciously attacks. Just then, the Japanese man arrives and calmly calls off the dog. The deacon, filled with fear, asks for forgiveness. The 3 of them quickly leave the house. On their way back, Jong-gu turns to his partner and asks about what he saw inside the house. He tells Jong-gu about the photographs of all the infected people he found in the house, along with the personal belongings of each victim. He then hands Jong-gu a shoe he discovered. It's his daughter's. Jong-gu immediately heads home and asks Hyojin if she's lost a shoe recently. He shows her the shoe his partner found and asks if she's met a Japanese man. She quietly nods. He gently presses her, asking her to tell him what happened when she encountered him. She screams that it's nothing serious and storms off. Later that night, Jong-gu finds unsettling drawings in his daughter's notebook. Concerned, he checks on Hyojin and notices rashes beginning to spread across her body. Hyojin suddenly wakes up, screaming at him, her condition worsening as she starts showing signs of the infection. The next morning, filled with rage, Jong-gu storms over to the deacon's place, and together, they head to the Japanese man's house. Jong-gu searches the house, but all the photographs and belongings have been burned. He confronts the Japanese man, demanding to know what happened to the items that were there earlier. At first, the Japanese man refuses to acknowledge anything, but eventually, he admits to burning the photos and belongings. Jong-gu demands to know the man's purpose and angrily threatens him, asking what he's done to his daughter. He orders the stranger to leave the village peacefully. Enraged, Jong-gu destroys the stranger's ritual room and kills the dog when it attacks him, warning the man to leave the village in 3 days. The following day, Jong-gu's mother finds the dead dog hanging in front of their house. She cries out and calls for him, but he can't get up, his body still weak from the previous day's fight with the dog. Suddenly, they discover Hyojin covered in blood. She has stabbed a woman. Not long after, the police arrive at their house. Concerned for Hyojin's condition, Jong-gu's mother calls for a shaman, Gwang, to help treat her. Gwang tells Jong-gu that the strange man is no ordinary person but the most powerful ghost he has ever encountered. As the village descends into chaos, with many people losing their lives, the tension grows. The next day, as Gwang performs his exorcism ritual to banish the demon, the Japanese man is also conducting his own rituals at his house. Gwang dances and leaps over the fire, sacrificing hens as part of his ceremony. As he stabs an effigy, both Hyojin and the Japanese man scream in agony, collapsing into unconsciousness. Seeing his daughter in pain, Jong-gu becomes frantic and interrupts the ritual, rushing her to the hospital. Meanwhile, the Japanese man regains consciousness as soon as the ritual ceases. That night, the deacon suggests Jong-gu visit the pastor for guidance. Jong-gu and the deacon visit the church, where the pastor advises him not to believe in the story of the ghost and instead trust in the doctors. The next day, the Japanese man disappears. Believing that the man is responsible for the illness and the murders, Jong-gu rallies his friends to hunt him down. Armed with weapons, they head toward the Japanese man's house. Upon arrival, they search the property but find no sign of him. Suddenly, they're attacked by an infected man. A fierce struggle ensues. The infected individual bites the deacon's face, causing him to scream in agony. They manage to fight back, striking the man with a crowbar and a spade. Just as the battle seems to reach a climax, the infected man's bones begin to crack unnaturally, and he collapses to the ground, dead. One of Jong-gu's friends spots the Japanese man watching them from the woods. They immediately chase after him, running through the forest. The man struggles to breathe as he desperately tries to escape, but he trips and injures himself. Soon, Jong-gu and his friends find themselves at a dead end, standing at the edge of a cliff. Overcome with emotion, Jong-gu cries out, expressing his need to find the Japanese man and save his daughter from him. The Japanese man clings to the edge of the cliff, trying to hide, but his grip slips, and he falls to the ground. Jong-gu and his friends hear the sound of the fall, but when they look around, they can't find him. The Japanese man whimpers in pain from where he lies, hidden from view. Unable to find the Japanese man in the woods, Jong-gu and his friends head back. As they drive, rain begins to pour, and the car skids on the slick road, nearly colliding with an approaching truck. Jong-gu, suffering from a head injury, stumbles out of the vehicle. To his shock, he sees the Japanese man lying on the road, realizing he had accidentally hit him with the car. In a state of confusion, Jong-gu and his friends push the lifeless body off the cliff. From a distance, Moo Myong watches them silently from the hill. Jong-gu quickly drives to the hospital to check on Hyojin. To his relief, her condition has seemingly improved. He asks if she's okay, hugging her tightly as they both cry, overwhelmed with emotion. Meanwhile, Gwang grows suspicious. He tries to contact Jong-gu, realizing that they may have killed the wrong person, but Jong-gu doesn't answer. That night, Jong-gu's partner becomes infected and tragically kills his wife. Meanwhile, the shaman drives to Jong-gu's house, but on his way, he encounters Moo Myong. Suddenly, he begins bleeding from his mouth and vomiting uncontrollably. Terrified, he runs to his house and begins performing a protection ritual. Just then, a crow flies in and drops dead. Gwang continues his drive to Jong-gu's, but as he navigates the road, he begins hallucinating a hailstorm. He stops the car and gets out, but finds nothing. Breathing heavily, he quickly calls Jong-gu, warning him that Moo Myong is the real demon. Back at Jong-gu's house, he searches for Hyojin, only to find her missing from her bed. His heart sinks as he spots Moo Myong near his home. Jong-gu confronts her, demanding that she return his daughter and accusing her of being the ghost. However, Moo Myong insists that the ghost of the Japanese man is the one who infected her. Moo Myong pleads with Jong-gu to believe her, explaining that the ghost of the Japanese stranger is the one who infected her. She begs him to trust her, warning that she had set a trap for the demon, but it won't work if Jong-gu returns to his house. Jong-gu, confused and desperate, asks her who she really is. She replies that she's trying to save his daughter. A little while later, Hyojin returns home. She enters the house without saying a word to anyone and immediately starts eating a large amount of food. Meanwhile, the deacon embarks on a search for the Japanese man. He eventually reaches a cave and encounters the Japanese stranger, still alive and performing his rituals. The deacon, filled with dread, asks the Japanese man if he is a demon. Soon, Gwang calls Jong-gu, urging him not to trust Moo Myong. In response, Moo Myong tells Jong-gu that Gwang is actually working with a real demon. Meanwhile, the deacon demands the Japanese stranger tell him who he really is if he's not a demon. The stranger remains silent, continuing his eerie rituals. Back at Jong-gu's house, he questions Moo Myong, asking why all of this is happening. She answers cryptically, saying, the father of the daughter sinned and even tried to kill. Filled with despair, Jong-gu rushes to his house to save his family. As he attempts to leave, Moo Myong suddenly grabs him, begging him not to go. She screams in agony as her body begins to turn white, a sign of her worsening condition. Jong-gu ignores her pleas and crosses the threshold of his home. The moment he enters, the floral trap vanishes, and he finds blood splattered all over the house. His heart breaks as he discovers the aftermath of the chaos, crying in anguish over what he has lost. Jong-gu enters the house, finding blood splattered everywhere. He breaks down in tears when he discovers his wife's lifeless body. Suddenly, Hyojin appears before him, covered in blood. Meanwhile, in the cave, the Japanese man takes a photograph of the deacon, his form slowly transforming into a twisted, crippled demon with glowing red eyes. Back at the house, Jong-gu is horrified when Hyojin stabs him, her eyes empty and cold. Outside, Moo Myong sits quietly, watching the scene unfold. As rain begins to fall, Gwang arrives at the house in his car, sensing the unfolding horror. Methodically taking photos of all the deceased members of Jong-gu's family. As he returns to his car, he accidentally drops a box filled with photographs of all the other infected victims. The film ends with Jong-gu lying on the floor, dying in his home. As he fades, he recalls the happier moments he shared with his daughter, whispering a promise to protect her. Thanks for watching. If you enjoyed this video, be sure to like, comment, and subscribe to the channel for more movie summaries.